Okay, last week we spent some time learning how to use Excel basic tools on pivot tables and to build dashboards and some Excel functions. And you can use these. I use these all the time for a variety of reasons. But if you start working with larger data sets and different sets of data, how can we do this? And in the past, what you would wind up doing is you would jump to a database management system. And what we have within Excel now are new tools called Power Query and Power Pivot, which give Microsoft Excel some very strong database capabilities. So they're fairly new. They're less than 10 years old. I highly recommend learning how to use these. If you learn how to use these tools, which is what we're going to do over the next 3 weeks, then um, you'll be able to quickly learn something called Power BI, which is an off-the-shelf product by Microsoft. Power Query and Power Pivot are the exact same engines. The things that drive that also drives Power BI. Power BI is very similar to Tableau. Microsoft's product or player in this is the Power BI tool. So I'll let you do your own research on why you should do Power Query and why we should learn this. There's plenty of things online. You can go look at what is the benefit of learning this. And it really gets down to giving you the ability to be data driven, to be able to do some analysis and interesting things with data. That's why we do it. That's what analytics is about. So there's two tools. This week, we're going to spend our time on Power Query. And then the next week or so, we start transitioning to Power Pivot. So Power Query is really about bringing in data into an Excel file. And we no longer just copy and paste things. What we're going to use is the data getting transformed data part of Excel. So within a spreadsheet, it used to be called Power Query. Now it's just under the Data tab, under the Get and Transform. So you can go grab data from a lot of different places, from databases, from online cloud services. There's all kinds of different things. We'll obviously spend most of our time grabbing data from Excel or CSV files as an education, as a starting point. But just keep in mind there are many, many different ways that you can go grab data. So that's one of the great things about this. The second thing is that within Power Query, which is again an add-in to Excel or a new thing, it's an add-in that when you start down that path, you got some data wrangling capabilities within Excel. So you're able to clean up data. So if you're bringing in data that's a little bit odd and you don't have a lot of control over the structure of that, you can within Power Query clean this up and transform it and make it do what you want. So this is the Power Query editor. We'll learn about how to do a lot of different ways of manipulating data, adding new calculated stuff to the data, and ultimately loading it to Excel, either to an Excel worksheet, which is generally not the best thing to do. More importantly is to load it to something called a data model that we'll talk about later on. So we're going to learn how to use Power Query this week. The other part is that it's if you've ever built Microsoft Excel macros, when we start building this data wrangling and we start doing this, we'll actually be getting a script, a recording of what we're doing. And that recording is saved. So when the data needs to be refreshed, it will follow this script of data again. So you're actually building a macro or a series of commands that are tied together. And you can edit that as needed if you need to use it. So it's a very powerful way to create code. And like I said before, where do you want to, once you've done the data wrangling and brought in data and transformed it, where do you want it to reside? A lot of times you just drop it into Excel. I'll just tell you right now, for large data sets, that's not what we'll do. We'll want to drop it into the data model. The data model is a new part of Excel. It's this Power Pivot world where we can drop in data sets that are much, much larger than what you can do with traditional Excel. With traditional Excel, the very last row in any worksheet is 1,000,000 rows. Now that seems pretty big, and it is big, but if you have a data set that has 5,000,000 rows, you can't use Excel to do it. Now you can. This data model will take much larger data sets. It's essentially, we've got a relational database built in to Excel in the current versions of Excel. Very powerful. So that's what Power Query is about. Then the next couple of weeks, we spend our time using Power Pivot and learning a little bit of the DAX language, a new language. It's like writing Excel formulas, but there's a specialized language we'll learn how to do. The easiest way to think of Power Pivot is that you're going to wind up building pivot tables, except we're going to have data in multiple resources. We're not going to have just one table of data. We'll be able to point to multiple data sources that are related, like a related database. And once they're related, we can use one data set to drive queries and pull information from another data set. Very powerful capabilities that we're going to be able to show what the benefits of this are. And we'll use a common database that we'll use common data sets, and we'll work our way through the examples on that. As part of what we'll do is we'll learn a new language within Excel called DAX. I should know what it stands for. If you would go Google it, you could do it. I know it has something to do with the expressions. It's fairly straightforward to start this. There's clearly some benefits of it that I'll show, that we'll have some examples. But keep in mind, from this class, we're just scratching the surface. I highly recommend, once we've gone through this class, you maintain and continue your expertise. And there's plenty of ways to do that. You can do YouTube classes, you can do specialized classes. This is just going to be the starting point of learning these power tools, Power Query, and Power Pivot. And like I said at the beginning, Power Query and Power Pivot, once you know those are exactly the same thing as something called Power BI, which is a free download. You can download Power BI and be using it right after this class and start using it. That's something you could put on your resume. It's a business intelligence, self-service business intelligence technology. Okay, that was just a brief intro. Then we'll start working through Power Query now. Thanks.